What if the most powerful conventional bomb ever built has finally met a target it can't destroy? For decades, the United States has invested billions of dollars solving one of warfare's oldest problems. How do you destroy an enemy that disappears underground? The answer seems simple. Build a bomb powerful enough to reach it. That weapon already exists. It weighs 30.0 pounds. It can punch through layers of reinforced concrete. It can drop deep into solid rock before exploding. And according to publicly available reports, it has already proven itself against some of Iran's most heavily fortified nuclear facilities. But now military planners are facing a completely different question. Not whether America can strike another underground target, but whether the target itself has evolved faster than the weapon designed to destroy it. Because hidden beneath one mountain in central Iran is a tunnel complex that many independent analysts believe may sit beyond the reliable reach of even America's most powerful conventional bunker buster. If those assessments are correct, then this isn't simply another potential airstrike. It's a test of whether military technology has finally reached one of its natural limits. And what happens next could reshape how every major power thinks about underground warfare. For years, military strategy followed a familiar pattern. Whenever defensive systems became stronger, offensive weapons became stronger too. Armor became thicker, bombs became heavier, missiles became more accurate. Every new defense eventually met an even more capable attack. It was an endless cycle. One side built a shield, the other built a larger hammer. For decades, that formula appeared to work, until nations began changing something far more fundamental. Instead of building stronger bunkers, they started building deeper ones. Not dozens of feet underground. Hundreds. Entire military facilities disappeared beneath mountains. Tunnel networks stretched through layers of granite. Critical equipment moved into chambers protected, not only by reinforced concrete, but by geology itself. Suddenly, destroying a target wasn't just about explosive power. It became a contest against the Earth. And that changes everything. That brings us to America's most specialized conventional weapon, the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator. It wasn't designed to create the largest explosion. It was designed to solve a very specific military problem. Reach what no other bomb could reach. Instead of exploding the instant it hits the ground, it keeps moving, driven by gravity, a hardened steel body, and enormous momentum. It buries itself deep beneath the surface before detonating. The goal isn't to destroy buildings. It's to destroy what was never supposed to be vulnerable in the first place. Underground command centers, hardened weapons depots, buried nuclear facilities, targets specifically engineered to survive conventional warfare. For years, many defense analysts viewed the GBU-57 as the final answer to underground fortifications. If something could be reached, this was the weapon expected to reach it. And when it was finally used operationally, available reporting suggested it performed exactly as intended, which only reinforced its reputation. But here's the problem. Success creates confidence. Confidence creates assumptions. And assumptions have a way of being tested. Over the past several years, satellite imagery has revealed something unusual happening near Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Construction didn't slow. It accelerated. New tunnel entrances appeared. Security perimeters expanded. Excavation equipment continued operating even during periods of heightened regional tension. According to multiple independent research organizations analyzing commercial satellite imagery, the underground complex continued growing while many other strategic facilities faced repeated military pressure. No international inspectors have publicly confirmed exactly what's inside. No independent team has walked through those tunnels. Much of what is believed comes from satellite analysis, engineering assessments, and observable construction patterns. But across several independent studies, one conclusion appears again and again. The facility may be significantly deeper than previous underground nuclear sites. And that possibility changes the entire strategic equation. Because military planning isn't built around what you hope is true. It's built around what might be true. Even uncertainty can reshape decisions, especially when the consequences are this significant. So the real question isn't whether America possesses an extraordinarily powerful bunker-busting weapon. It does. The real question is whether anyone can build underground facilities faster than technology can destroy them. Because if one mountain can survive the world's most advanced conventional bomb, How many others could follow? And that's where this story stops being about one target inside Iran. It becomes a much bigger question about the future of deterrence itself. Because before anyone decides whether to strike a mountain, we first have to understand why this weapon became so important in the first place, and why so many believed it had already solved the underground warfare problem. For most of military history, the safest place on a battlefield wasn't behind thicker armor. It was underground. The deeper a command center could be buried, the more likely it was to survive. That simple idea changed modern warfare. By the end of the Cold War, nations weren't just hiding missiles beneath the earth. They were building entire military ecosystems underground. Command bunkers, communication centers, weapons storage, power supplies, ventilation systems. Everything needed to continue fighting, even if the surface had already been destroyed. Two military planners. These weren't just buildings. They were the nervous system of a nation's defense. Destroying them could cripple an enemy without fighting every unit on the battlefield. But there was one problem. Most bombs weren't built for that mission. A conventional bomb releases enormous energy, but much of that energy escapes into the air, against a deeply buried target. The explosion often destroys the surface, while leaving the critical facility below largely intact. That forced engineers to ask a completely different question. Instead of building a bigger explosion, what if the bomb exploded exactly where the target was hiding? That single question led to one of the most specialized weapons ever developed. The GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator. Unlike traditional bombs, the GBU-57 isn't designed to hit. It's designed to keep going. Everything about the weapon serves one purpose: penetration. Its reinforced steel casing allows it to survive tremendous impact forces. Its enormous weight provides the momentum needed to drive through layers of earthen-reinforced structures. And its sophisticated fuse weights. It doesn't detonate immediately. Instead, according to publicly available descriptions, the weapon is designed to sense its progress as it moves through different layers of material, delaying the explosion until it reaches the depth where it can cause the greatest damage. The result is very different from a surface blast. Instead of wasting energy upward, the explosion is trapped underground. Shockwaves ricochet through confined tunnels. Pressure builds. Reinforced chambers become far more vulnerable than they would be from an explosion above ground. The weapon wasn't built to destroy cities. It was built to destroy certainty. The certainty that hiding underground meant survival. But the bomb alone isn't what makes this capability extraordinary. Delivering it may be even harder than building it. The GBU-57 is simply too large for most combat aircraft. Only one operational aircraft has been publicly acknowledged as capable of carrying it into heavily defended airspace. The B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. That pairing is no accident. A weapon this valuable cannot simply be dropped from any aircraft flying overhead. The bomber has to reach one of the world's most heavily defended targets, avoid sophisticated radar networks, release its payload with extraordinary precision, and then fly thousands of miles home. Every mission demands aerial refueling, extensive planning, global logistics, electronic warfare support, and crews capable of remaining focused after spending well over a day in the air. When people see a single bomb in a headline, they rarely see the international operation required just to put it over the target. That capability was put to its most significant test during strikes against Iran's hardened nuclear infrastructure. According to publicly available reporting, B-2 bombers targeted deeply buried facilities using multiple massive ordnance penetrators in carefully planned attack sequences. The objective wasn't simply to hit the mountain, it was to exploit the same point of impact repeatedly. Each strike prepared the way for the next. Rather than spreading bombs across a wide area, military planners concentrated their effort on a handful of precise locations. The strategy reflected years of research into underground target defeat. If one weapon opened the path, the next could penetrate even farther. Analysts generally assessed that the strikes demonstrated the weapon's intended capability against deeply buried facilities, while questions remained about the full extent of underground damage. Few doubted that the GBU-57 had fundamentally changed what conventional air power could achieve. For many observers, that operation appeared to settle the debate. America had solved the bunker problem. Or so it seemed. But here's the problem. Every weapon is designed around an assumption. For aircraft carriers, the assumption was control of the sea. For tanks, it was control of the battlefield. For bunker busters, the assumption was simple. No one could build deeper than they could penetrate. That assumption may no longer be true, because while engineers were designing better bombs, others were redesigning the battlefield itself. Instead of asking, how do we stop the bomb? They asked, what if the bomb can never reach us in the first place? That is a completely different kind of defense, and it leads directly to one mountain. That has become one of the most closely watched pieces of terrain in the world. Not because anyone knows exactly what's inside, but because of what might be. And if the estimates are even close to correct, America's most powerful conventional weapon may be facing the first target it was never guaranteed to defeat. But that confidence may have been built on an assumption that's only now being challenged. If the GBU-57 represents the peak of conventional bunker-minus busting technology, then Pickaxe Mountain represents the next evolution of underground defense. This is where the story changes. Not because we suddenly know more, but because we may have reached the point where physics begins to matter more than firepower. Located near Iran's Natanz nuclear complex, Pickaxe Mountain has attracted growing attention from intelligence analysts, satellite imagery specialists, and nuclear researchers. Not because inspectors have entered the site. They haven't. In fact, according to publicly available information, international inspectors have never independently verified what lies inside the tunnel network. Everything we know comes from the outside. Commercial satellite imagery, construction patterns, excavation activity, security improvements, engineering analysis. Each piece alone tells only part of the story. Together, they suggest something unusual. Construction appears to have continued even during periods when much of Iran's strategic infrastructure faced repeated military pressure. Fresh spoil piles indicated continued excavation. Tunnel entrances appeared reinforced. New security barriers emerged. Heavy machinery remained active. Too many analysts. Those weren't the signs of a completed facility. They looked more like a project still expanding beneath the mountain. But expansion alone isn't what drew global attention. Depth did. Military planners don't measure underground facilities the same way civilians do. A tunnel entrance tells you almost nothing. The real question is what lies behind it. How far does it descend? What type of rock surrounds it? How many chambers exist beyond the visible opening? Those answers determine whether a facility is merely hardened or effectively protected by geology itself. Several independent assessments have suggested that key portions of the complex may lie significantly deeper than previously targeted Iranian facilities. Some estimates place important sections hundreds of feet beneath solid rock. Others emphasize that the surrounding granite dramatically increases the challenge of penetration compared with softer geological formations. None of these figures are publicly confirmed, and responsible analysts continue to stress that uncertainty. But uncertainty cuts both ways. If military planners cannot confidently determine what's underground, they also cannot confidently predict how much force would actually be required to destroy it. And that's a dangerous place for strategy to live. For decades, military superiority often depended on building a better weapon. Now another possibility has emerged: building a better hiding place. That may sound simple, but strategically, it's profound, because every new generation of bunker-minus busting weapons is expensive. Where? Complex. Time-minus consuming to produce. Digging deeper. By comparison, may be slower, but in some cases, it could be cheaper than designing the next revolutionary bomb. That changes the economics of deterrence. Instead of competing weapon against weapon, it becomes engineering against engineering, concrete against steel, mountain against momentum, and suddenly, the advantage may no longer belong entirely to the attacker. But here's the deeper problem. Destroying a tunnel isn't always the same as destroying what matters inside it. Even if a strike collapses entrances, critical equipment could survive elsewhere within a sprawling underground network. Repair crews might reopen access. Alternative tunnels may exist. Redundant chambers could remain operational, without inspectors on the ground, or reliable post-minus strike verification. No military can immediately know the full outcome. That uncertainty creates a second battlefield, the information battlefield. Governments announce success. Opponents claim resilience. Satellite analysts examine fresh imagery. Outside experts debate damage assessments for months or even years. Victory becomes harder to measure. And, in modern conflict, perception can shape strategy almost as much as physical destruction. That leaves military planners facing an uncomfortable decision. If intelligence suggests a target is beyond the reliable reach of existing weapons, do you strike anyway? One option would be a layered attack. Military analysts have long discussed using multiple precision bunker minus busting weapons against the exact same impact point. Each weapon attempts to penetrate farther than the last. The concept is straightforward. Every strike prepares the path for the next, but executing that plan is anything but simple. Each additional bombing pass requires extraordinary precision. Aircraft must revisit one of the world's most heavily defended targets. Mission risk increases. Time over hostile territory increases. Opportunities for detection increase. And even after all that, success still isn't guaranteed. The alternative may be even more difficult. Except that conventional weapons have limits. That doesn't mean the mission fails. It means strategy changes. Pressure shifts toward sanctions. Intelligence collection. Diplomatic leverage. Covert disruption. Military force becomes only one piece of a much larger campaign. Ironically, the stronger the bunker becomes, the more valuable non-minus military tools may become. That's one of warfare's oldest paradoxes. Sometimes the hardest target isn't defeated by using more force. It's defeated by changing the game entirely. Which brings us to another question that has received far less attention. Why publicly identify the target at all? When senior political leaders openly discuss a specific facility before any strike occurs, the message isn't directed only at military planners. It's directed at everyone watching. Iran, regional allies, global financial markets, international negotiators. Public statements can become strategic pressure. They force an opponent to consider consequences before a single aircraft leaves the runway. Sometimes the threat itself becomes part of the operation. If negotiations resume, the weapon may never need to fly. If deterrence succeeds, the mountain may never be struck. And that possibility reminds us of something important. Not every military victory begins with an explosion. Some begin with convincing your opponent that one is possible. But all of this leads to a much larger question. If underground facilities continue becoming deeper, and conventional weapons continue approaching their physical limits, who is actually adapting faster? The nations building more powerful bombs? Or the nations building stronger mountains? Because the answer won't shape only one conflict. It may define how wars are fought for decades to come. Throughout modern history, military innovation has followed a familiar cycle. One side develops a breakthrough. The other side adapts. Then the cycle begins again. Aircraft made battleships vulnerable. Radar challenged aircraft. Stealth challenged radar. Precision weapons challenged armored formations. And every time a new technology appeared unstoppable, someone eventually discovered its limits. That may be exactly what we're witnessing now. Not the failure of one weapon, but the beginning of the next chapter in military competition. The discussion surrounding Pickaxe Mountain isn't really about whether one bomb can destroy one tunnel. It's about something much larger. For decades, air power promised that no target could remain permanently protected. If intelligence could find it, aircraft could reach it. And if aircraft could reach it, weapons could destroy it. That belief has shaped military planning for generations. But what happens when geography itself becomes part of the defense? Not just concrete, not just steel, entire mountains. The battlefield changes. Instead of trying to defeat an enemy's military, you first have to defeat millions of tons of rock. And rock doesn't negotiate. Rock doesn't surrender. Rock simply obeys physics. That's why many defense analysts see underground warfare as one of the fastest changing areas of modern military strategy. Around the world, governments have spent years expanding hardened facilities. Some are protecting command centers. Others safeguard missile forces. Some house aircraft. Others protect industrial production. The objective is always the same: preserve critical capabilities long enough to survive the opening phase of a conflict. Because survival creates options, and options create leverage. If an opponent cannot confidently eliminate your most important assets, every decision they make becomes more complicated. Deterrence grows stronger, even before the first shot is fired. But here's the deeper strategic lesson. Military superiority has never been about owning the strongest weapon. It's about maintaining an advantage after your opponent adapts. That's a much harder challenge. History is filled with weapons once considered revolutionary. The battleship, the fortress, the tank, strategic bombers, each transformed warfare. None remained dominant forever. Not because they stopped working, but because someone developed an answer. Sometimes that answer was another weapon. Sometimes it was a new doctrine. Sometimes it was simply a different way of thinking. The contest never truly ends. It only moves to another battlefield. If Pickaxe Mountain ultimately proves resistant to conventional attack, the response won't necessarily be immediate. It could unfold over years. Engineers may explore new penetrator designs. Military planners may rethink how underground targets are approached. Intelligence agencies could place even greater emphasis on surveillance and covert operations. Diplomatic pressure might become more valuable than another air campaign. Or nations could simply continue digging deeper. Each path carries consequences. Each requires enormous resources. And each shapes the future balance between offense and defense. There's another reason this story matters. Modern wars are increasingly defined by uncertainty. Satellite imagery provides remarkable insight. Open-source intelligence has become extraordinarily sophisticated. Commercial analysts can track construction projects from space. But even with all that technology, no one outside the mountain can say with complete confidence what's happening inside it. That uncertainty affects every decision. Political leaders must weigh incomplete intelligence. Military commanders plan around probabilities. Analysts debate competing interpretations. And the public often sees only fragments of a much larger picture. In many ways, modern conflict isn't just fought on land, at sea, or in the air. It's fought between competing assessments of reality itself. That is why responsible military analysis matters. Not because it predicts the future, but because it explains the limits of certainty. There are many things we simply don't know. We don't know the exact layout of every tunnel. We don't know precisely what equipment may or may not be inside. We don't know what future political decisions will ultimately be made. And anyone claiming absolute certainty should probably be viewed with caution. The most credible assessments acknowledge uncertainty. They compare multiple sources. They distinguish confirmed facts from informed estimates. And they remain willing to change as new evidence emerges. That isn't weakness. It's how serious strategic analysis works. So where does all of this leave us? The United States has demonstrated an extraordinary capability to strike deeply buried targets using conventional weapons. According to publicly available reporting, those capabilities have fundamentally changed how underground facilities are viewed around the world. But Pickaxe Mountain represents a different kind of challenge. Not because we know it cannot be destroyed, but because enough credible analysts believe it might test the limits of what current conventional weapons can reliably accomplish. That possibility alone changes strategic planning. Military commanders must prepare for it. Political leaders must consider it. Adversaries are certainly studying it. Because even the perception of a limitation can influence deterrence. In the end, this story isn't really about Iran. And it isn't only about the GBU-57. It's about a question every military power will face in the decades ahead. Can offensive technology continue advancing faster than defensive engineering? Or are we entering an era where hiding critical capabilities underground becomes easier than destroying them from above? If that's true, then the future of warfare may not belong solely to those who build the biggest bombs, but to those who build the deepest systems. And that would represent one of the most significant shifts in military strategy since the emergence of precision-guided weapons. So here's the question I'd leave you with. If military technology has finally reached the point where even the world's most powerful conventional weapons can no longer guarantee success, does the next breakthrough come from building an even bigger bomb? Or from finding entirely new ways to win without dropping one at all? That's a debate that will shape military planning long after this particular crisis has passed. And it's one worth watching very closely. Because history has shown something remarkable. The weapons that define one generation often reveal their limits in the next. And that's usually where the next revolution begins.